Welcome in, everybody, to another live reaction show to the college football playoff top 25 rankings reveal. We're really excited to be alongside you guys for now the penultimate college football playoff rankings. I got a little bit ahead of myself last week, but
Trey knows big words. That's the important part.
That's the important thing. I know big words and I like to use them. And we are really excited. We're kicking down the timer right now, 50 seconds until the show at least starts for the penultimate college football playoff rankings reveal. I'm here with Garrett Turney. Sir, how are we doing tonight? How are we feeling? A couple days removed from a brutal rivalry week loss for our team, but now we get to turn our attention full head to the college football playoff race and kind of get to be emotionally removed from it and just react.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It should be relatively drama-free. I mean, I think we have a pretty good idea of what we think is going to happen. I think a couple things to look at is where does the SEC land right now? Obviously, I think we know who in the SEC is in terms of it being, probably Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee. But then you got to ask yourself more of, where does that little South Carolina, Bama, Ole Miss group, kind of land? And there's a lot of interesting questions to be answered around, conference championships and how do you treat the losers of those games. We'll talk about a lot of that after we see kind of where these teams land. But I am really fascinated to see how a lot of this seeding is going to shake out and who they value over whoever else. So it's going to be interesting, and I'm just kind of excited to see what that playoff committee in Grapevine, Texas, as we're seeing them. What are they thinking? What's in those guys' brains?
Well, let's start there. Let's start with who we think are locks at this point, because we know they're going to explain the playoff for the umpteenth time. Let's go to the All-State playoff predictor, and like it or not, I do think that it is a good indicator of where things stand. According to the All-State playoff predictor, there are 8 teams that have a 96% chance or higher to make the college football playoff. There are 6 teams that have a 99% chance or higher to make the college football playoff. So let's start there. Garrett, tell me if any of these teams are not a lock in your mind as we're heading into Champ Week. We've got Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Georgia, Indiana, all at 99% or higher. And then Tennessee at 98%, Ohio State at 96%. Not a lot to disagree with there, but there are some intriguing storylines I'm looking for in the rankings, especially when it comes to will Ohio State still be hosting a playoff game after losing to Michigan this week?
Yeah, for me it's the seeding. It doesn't have to do with making it. I think all the teams you just mentioned should make it. I think pretty much everyone agrees with that. I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of hot takes like, well, actually, Indiana. I don't think there's a lot of those out there. And if there are, you don't need to listen to them because they're absurd. And so we don't want to listen to those hot takes. But yeah, seeding is going to be really interesting. We were talking a little bit ahead of time about how are they going to treat Ohio State? Are they going to, take Ohio State and say, well, you lost to Michigan. This is one of Michigan's worst seasons in recent history. You haven't shown us in the past, 5 years, 4 losses plus the one that they didn't play that you can beat this team. So what do we really care? What do we think about you? Blah, blah, blah. I'm really curious to see how they treat Ohio State in terms of seeding. I personally, if it were up to me, I would put them on the road probably as the 9 seed, make them go on the road somewhere fairly evenly matched, but maybe do like a send them to Knoxville type of thing. I don't know if that's totally off.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We do have our first couple sets of rankings here. Going to move fast to this bottom part tonight because it really doesn't matter. None of these teams, I guess, except for Army, maybe are in contention. Memphis at 25, Army at 24, Colorado at 23, Syracuse at 22. And I'm waiting for number 21 to pop up right now. You might be a little bit ahead of me, Garrett. But so far, and there's Illinois at number 21. So far, 3 new teams to the rankings. So congratulations to Memphis for jumping in, Army for jumping back in, and Syracuse for jumping in after their big win against Miami.
That was big for Syracuse, and obviously devastating for Miami. I don't really see their path in. But yeah, it's a big win for Syracuse, and at least you get yourself ranked, right? It's good for the brand, good for the program, right? Maybe helps you in the transfer portal, and what a heck of a year for Syracuse. First year under the new head coach and this new program they're trying to put up there, resurgence of Kyle McCord and all that. It's exciting. A lot of fun storylines around the program.
We thought that they had a chance to do that going into the season, but it's really cool to see them get on board with that. UNLV checks in at 20, so a couple spots, 4 spots ahead of Army. That tells me pretty much all I need to know about the G5 situation.
Mhm.
It is going to be the winner of the Mountain West. That was already a foregone conclusion, but we were interested to see just how far apart UNLV and Army were. Mizzou at 19, BYU at 18. Some people are giving them some at-large buzz. I think 18 puts them a little too far out. And then Clemson at 17, very obviously down from number 12 last week in a win to get in situation in the ACC championship game. And then Iowa State, same thing, win to get in, sitting there at 16, Garrett.
Yeah, Clemson getting knocked here is interesting. I'm curious what that means for like the buys and stuff like that. I wonder if that means if Clemson wins their conference, if they're not valuing them as highly as like an Arizona State or an Iowa State, or even I'm sure what we'll see here in a little bit of Boise State, if they don't value them that highly right now and they win the conference, does that mean that they get in as a not an at-large, but with the no buy? That would be really interesting to see.
It does appear that if Boise State wins, that one of the Big 12 or ACC champions will not get a bye. It'll be really interesting
They're
to
ranked
see.
above any of those teams right now, outside of probably SMU, who's in that mix as well. But they could land the 3 seed realistically if it's Clemson and any of the Big 12 teams. Like if it's those 2 teams that win their conferences, Boise State could be the 3 seed, and that's actually maybe a storyline going under the radar a little bit tonight.
That would be really interesting. That would be really, really interesting. And then all the people that talked about wanting the 5 seed would kind of go up and smoke a little bit because you're playing a hot Clemson team or a Big 12 champion. Arizona State at 15 is going to be the highest Big 12 team. South Carolina was getting a lot of at-large buzz this week, but they're going to end up being ranked behind both of the teams they lost to head-to-head. They're going to be compared to them. I think that all but eliminates South Carolina, checking in at 14, right behind Ole Miss at 13, and little old Alabama, I'm guessing, hasn't popped up on my screen yet, but I'm guessing little old Alabama, that everybody's hating that they're even in consideration, is going to check in at number 12 here and probably be the first team. Am I incorrect? Miami at number 12.
Incorrect.
So Alabama will be in. And my byline here, if you're watching and not listening to the replay, you'll get a 3-loss team and you'll like it. Alabama is going to check in at number 11, guys, at least number 11. And heads are about to explode on Twitter.
It's okay, that's guys. It's Alabama.
Miami,
it's who they are.
Listen.
This has nothing to do with brand names. This has nothing to do with blue bloods. Okay? Just trust us, guys.
They're going to have to earn it, though. They will have to go on the road, and they were given the benefit of the doubt last year, and they lost to Michigan. Obviously, they won the conference last year, so it's a little bit different. But they're going to have to go on the road. They're going to be the 11 seed, likely, because the Big 12 representative Arizona State in this bracket is going to be the 12 seed. So they're going to be playing likely Notre Dame on the road in this bracket, looking ahead a little bit to what we're going to see on the next couple of slides here from the playoff committee. But yeah, Garrett, your just overall thoughts on the committee doing the dang thing and putting a 3-loss team in these rankings.
I just don't understand at all. I get it. Miami hasn't looked that good. I'm fine sliding them down. What happened to 10-2 Arizona State? I understand, there's some teams that, maybe didn't start as highly ranked and they're having to climb up from nothing. I get that, but I just don't understand having a 3-loss team like Alabama up this high. I understand that the SEC is extremely competitive conference. I understand all of that. I'm not trying to debate the SEC and what it is, but man, the 3-loss thing is going to be this is going to be a real topic of conversation this week. And I'm all here for it. I'm so excited for Sunday when they roll out just where Alabama is. If you see the wrong things happening this next week, like if you see SMU lose, if you see, maybe it's the Arizona State fails to whatever it is, you could find Alabama hosting realistically. They're within hosting shot if the right things happen.
Well, I think that they're not within hosting shot. I don't think that that would be possible.
They don't have to. Whoever is the 5th doesn't have to be the one who, like, they don't have to, or whoever gets the 5th conference bid doesn't have to be number 5.
No, I know, but they're going to be the 11 seed, and there's too many idle teams in front of them to that. I don't see them getting into the hosting picture. But
I didn't see them at 11.
But they can't lose their way out this week. So it would take some real mental gymnastics from the committee to keep them completely out at this point. And if you followed the betting lines, I know we give Josh Pate a lot of flack on the show, but he did a good job of covering the betting lines today of who FanDuel was favoring to make the college football playoff. And if you read the tea leaves from the betting lines, Alabama's number kept dropping and dropping and dropping today as it was more and more favored for them to be in the ultimately the college football playoff. Something I'm noticing here, Garrett, I don't think Ohio State is going to be punished enough for their loss to Michigan because Indiana is going to check in at number 9. Boise State was at 10. We didn't mention that. SMU is going to be at 8. Tennessee is at 7. And I'm guessing Ohio State's going to slide in here at 6. I kind of hate that.
I hope they're at 6. If they put them still in front of Notre Dame, I'm going to be shocked. I'm going to be absolutely shocked if they keep them in front of Notre Dame. All right, there it is. So I just got it on my screen. I got Ohio State at 6.
Ohio State's going to be number 6, so they will fall out of the top 5. They're down 4 spots, but man, that other teams have been punished for far better. Other teams have been punished far worse for far better losses this year, in my opinion.
I mean, Clemson dropped 5 spots just now for losing to South Carolina, who's like in the field and competitive. I don't know what to say at this point. This is,
Ohio State does have 2 very quality wins, as we see Georgia checking at number 5, 10-2 Georgia, up 2 spots as they survived a rivalry week scare of their own against Georgia Tech. Notre Dame will be number 4, but remember they can't be a top 4 seed because they don't play in a conference. So they will be locked into the 5 seed here.
Yeah, they'll be number 5.
They'll be number 6.
Penn State loses or Oregon loses,
they'll be number 6 in this bracket because the Big Ten, Penn State will be number 5 behind Oregon, and then they'll be the 6th seed in this bracket.
Well, so I'm wondering more for Sunday. Are they going to be number 5 in front of the Big Ten runner-up, or would they end up like? Because I feel like if it's Oregon would stay above Notre Dame, but maybe Penn State would slide behind. I don't know.
I don't think you can punish a team for it's going to be interesting. This is going to be a conversation that we have here in a second as we get the last little bit of rankings there. It is Penn State 3, Texas 2, and Oregon retaining their spot at number 1 as the only undefeated team remaining in college football. So we'll get the bracket up for you guys here in just a second, but your auto bids: Oregon from the Big Ten, Texas from the SEC, SMU from the ACC, Boise State from the Mountain West, still holding on to that 4 spot in a first-round bye, and Arizona State would be the Big 12 representative, checking in at number 15 in the rankings, but getting that number 12 seed. Garrett, I'm going to let you take it from here for a couple minutes as I get the graphic ready.
Yep, so kind of what we've been doing. If anyone's watching wants to leave a comment about these matchups, I'm going to kind of go through them to start. Let me just pause my stream real quick so I don't lose the spot here. Yeah, but looking at kind of the matchups, we got Arizona State and Penn State in that first little group. They would go up against Boise State getting that 4th seed. Absolutely love that for Boise State, by the way. I love that the committee is continuing to respect what Boise State has done all year, and they're not just going to say, well, we like the ACC or we like the Big 12 a little bit better than we like the Mountain West, so we're going to punish Boise for their conference affiliation. They're actually rewarding the results on the field, and the fact that Boise State has been one of the better teams this year. I like that. I like that that's what's happening. So that's kind of your first group. Boise State would play the winner of Arizona State, Penn State in this model. You have Tennessee and Ohio State. That would be, that's the matchup I think most of us are rooting for. That's a fantastic game, fairly regional, right? Not a super far drive for those Tennessee fans. They would go on, whoever wins that game would go on to play Oregon. So definitely think that's the big heavy hitting matchup in this scenario. Alabama Notre Dame would be the next matchup. Alabama traveling to Notre Dame. And then the winner of that game would play SMU. Of course, a couple of historic brands there. Alabama and Notre Dame. So that would be really, really fun to watch that one. I think obviously kind of a weird situation where it's two running quarterbacks that kind of run first guys. And I think it'd be interesting to watch kind of which of those, similar styles, which of those styles can be executed the best. Very, very curious to see how that one would work out. And then they would play SMU. And then Indiana, Georgia would go to play Texas. So we could see Texas, Georgia 3 times this year, which I know is what everybody's excited about, is to see the same game 3 times in the same year. But, nevertheless, that is the situation that we find ourselves in. Of course, that could flip if Georgia were to win the SEC. They would get the bye, and then I would assume Texas would probably just swap with them, maybe slide out to 5, maybe 6. I don't know exactly how they'd handle that, but still fun. You'd like to say that the Hoosiers would have a chance in that one, but they, didn't really stand much of a chance against Ohio State, who's maybe become a little bit more exposed as fraudulent recently. So I don't know how they would handle Georgia. Of course, you got to consider that Georgia didn't exactly handle their business against Georgia Tech. I know that's a rivalry game. I know that that's what happens in rivalry games, but you still got to put that in as a possibility. So that's that. Definitely a lot to talk about there. A couple of, I think, interesting hosting spots. You get 2 hosts from the Big Ten, 1 host from the SEC, and then obviously Notre Dame not affiliated. Of those matchups, obviously this won't be our final list of matchups, but if this is how it ends up shaking out or something like this, I really like the way that these matchups are going. And the point that I'll continue to make, right? The first 2 teams out are Miami and Ole Miss, according to this ranking. I don't really have a problem with that at all. And I think that's the point that we were trying to get at with the 12-team playoff. We've said it just about every single time we've come in here and done the show. I wanted to make sure that with the 12-team playoff that there was no real room for complaining. If you're Miami, if you're Ole Miss, if you're South Carolina, right, if you're any of those, you don't really have a case. I know that you're going to make your case. I know that everybody's going to say, well, no, but my team, you don't have a case, right? You lose enough games, you blow it enough times, you don't get to just get the benefit of the doubt, right? You don't get to just have benefit of the doubt that, you should have been there just because you're playing better now, or, well, we only lost to LSU because we weren't, we didn't have a quarterback for the second half. All of that's fine and dandy. But you're not going to convince me that any of these teams are more deserving or less deserving. Maybe Bama doesn't deserve it as much as South Carolina, but they beat them head to head. Maybe they haven't been playing as well recently. I don't care. You're going to give one of those teams that spot. I don't think we missed anybody in this ranking who deserves it.
Well, go ahead and throw that graphic up on the screen for me, if you will, Garrett, so we can talk through this. You did a great job explaining that for everybody. Here's my gripes with where we're at right now. I mentioned it earlier. I don't think Ohio State dropped enough. I don't think they deserve to host a playoff game when you lose as a 20-point favorite. I know it's a rivalry game. I know it's all that. It's the game, right? I just don't think that they should be hosting Tennessee there. You can't really square that circle for me. Tennessee has obviously beaten Alabama, a playoff team. I know Ohio State has wins over Indiana and Penn State, but I think Tennessee's body of work and the way that they're playing right now, I don't understand how you could reward Ohio State by still hosting a first-round playoff game with the way that they lost to Michigan. I think that those games, like honestly, it is a tougher path because they will have to go through Oregon instead of Boise State, so they were punished. But still getting that game at home just doesn't seem like enough of a punishment for me. That's my number one gripe. Here's a bigger question for you, Garrett, because we're sitting here. I was really interested to see where Boise State checked in because obviously they were going to be the 4 seed in the bracket no matter where they were ranked. I didn't think they were going to fall behind Arizona State. So we are looking at Boise State here. They're 10th in the poll, so still locked into that 4 seed. What happens if UNLV knocks them off in the Mountain West Championship game? Because all week long, I've heard you can't hold it against them. If Georgia loses, they can't fall out of the college football playoff, right? Because you don't want to hold a game that other people didn't have to play. You don't want to put somebody in that didn't play this week and punish somebody that had to play this week. You hear that with Georgia. We're hearing that with SMU as an argument. Does that same logic follow with Boise State? Because they're ranked as the top 10 team right now. So objectively, the committee thinks if their rankings are legit, objectively right now in this moment, they think that Boise State is a better football team than Alabama, than Miami, than Ole Miss, than South Carolina, than anyone in the Big 12. So if they happen to lose on any given Saturday to UNLV this week, what did any of those teams, other than the ones that played their way in through a potential conference championship, what would any of those teams that are idle have done to prove that they're a better team than Boise State by not playing when Boise State had to? So I'm a little fired up about this, but if we're going to play that logic game, I know the committee's just going to do whatever they want and we're just all going to have to live with it. But logically, you have to keep Boise State in too if they lose.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how that fits with the whole 5 conference champs thing. If that means that UNLV would jump up and get the auto bid for being a conference champ and Boise stays. I don't know if that's how that works. Like, do you bump Alabama for that? Do you bump, who was I guess Arizona State, but they would get in probably on the auto bid.
Well, but if you don't think if you think Alabama should be in over Boise, why are they not ranked ahead of Boise right now?
That's the point. Like, if I'm looking at this and I'm just looking objectively at the numbers and where they stand right now, Arizona State would be number 12, right? So if they were to get the bye week, right, because they win their conference, if they get the bye week, or if it's Iowa State, they could also get the bye, right? Either of them could grab that bye with a Boise State loss. UNLV would be in the field because they would be the highest ranked, 5th conference champ or whatever. And after that, yeah, what do you do with Boise? I mean, I think you slide them backwards 2, I guess, if it's, a Big 12 champ going up and then UNLV also getting in the field. And you have to kick Bama. Like, I think that's just what has to happen. I mean, right now, Boise's ranked ahead of Bama. And if you're going to say that UNLV has to be in the field because it's the 5th conference champ, then yeah, like, somebody's got to go. And right now, the odd man out is Bama. And I can't imagine them doing that, right? I mean, what would happen if they take Alabama, who doesn't play, who you're saying, well, we can't punish you because you didn't play. And we're saying, well, you can't punish Boise because they didn't play. But we ranked Boise ahead of you. And so now that UNLV has to be in the playoff, it's going to be Boise and UNLV in the playoff, and Alabama gets kicked. I can't possibly imagine that happening. But just purely on logic and what the committee said, that would have to be what happens.
That's what's so dumb about this and having it be a committee and not having any objective ranking system. Because if you had something like an RPI or something along those lines, then you can obviously weigh conference championship games however you want. And we would know that, sure, by this objective metric, then we think Alabama is a better team, even though they've lost 3 games. They played a much tougher schedule. Boise State's only loss, let me just remind everybody, is to the number 1 team in the country, and it was week 2. It was on the road, and they played them closer than pretty much anybody outside of Ohio State has played Oregon this year. So I'm not ready to write off. First of all, I'm not ready to write off Boise State against the winner of Penn State, Arizona State. If this is how the bracket shook out, I would not automatically pick the winner of that first round game against Boise State in a neutral field. But secondary to that, like, you just can't logically justify Alabama sitting out for a week and then jumping Boise State if Boise State loses because they had to play an extra game against a team they already beat earlier this year, mind you, on the road. So, I know I sound like fired up about this, and a lot of people out there listening are probably like, who cares? It's Boise State. Like, they're just lucky to be having a shot anyways, and whatever, that's fine. But we've seen this time and time again with the committee, Garrett. I think back to TCU when they, in the first ever college football playoff rankings, it was a little different because it was 4 teams, obviously. They're sitting there at 3rd, and they win a game like 52-3 or something like that, and they get jumped by Ohio State to get into the field. That I think back to last year Yeah, Austin, if you're just jumping in, like we're talking about that right now. I think back to last year where there was an undefeated conference champion in the field and we leave them out. A power conference champion that was in a 4-team field and we leave them out. So the committee's going to do whatever the hell they want. And we're just going to have to deal with their faulty logic until we come up with some objective system. So I'm just telling everybody right now, hopefully Boise State wins and this isn't an issue. But I'm going to stand on tables for Boise State to get in, even if they lose, based on the logic of the committee showing you right here. Because if you don't think they're better than Alabama, rank them below Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, you made a point in there that I actually want to kind of I want to elaborate a little bit on that. You said in the middle there, oh, I know people are just saying, like, who cares? It's just Boise State. They're just happy to be here. No, like, Boise State cares.
Yeah.
That's who cares.
Exactly.
They care because they're saying, hey, what have we done all year except for, maybe come runner-up in our conference, if that were the case, and lose to number one? Like, what? And not even get, like, smoked by number one. It was a close game. If that's the case, and if that's the situation they find themselves in, and you're telling me that Alabama gets in because they lost to Vandy and Tennessee and who I can't even remember
Oklahoma.
Yeah, and Oklahoma. Yeah, you get blown out by two, like, kind of not that good teams, and then one team in the playoff field. Like, what are we talking about? Why is Alabama in this if Boise loses? Because, again, like, following their own rules that they set for themselves, it would be UNLV and at 12, and Boise should get in at large at 11.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that's controversial whatsoever, outside of the fact that you're saying the SEC gets one fewer and that's it. My big question, and, kind of on that vein, and this is kind of what I'm curious to see, is what happens to this bracket if it's just madness, right? Like, what if it's Penn State wins the Big Ten, Georgia wins the SEC, Clemson wins the ACC, UNLV wins the Mountain West, Iowa State wins the Big 12. Like, what happens? Like, obviously, there's going to be a lot of, like, weird seeding stuff, but, like, do we start kicking teams because of where they're currently ranked? Like, are we going to be kicking Indiana to make sure that SMU stays in? Are we going to be kicking Alabama to make sure Tennessee stays in? Like, what's happening in that situation?
Well, it's going to depend on a couple of things. It's going to depend on how the committee values conference championship games. And if they want to set a precedent that if you lose, you could lose your way out by playing in a conference championship game when other people aren't. So I think we got to think about this. It's going to take some adjustment, but you really got to think about this like college basketball and think about conference tournament weeks and the bubble watches that everybody publishes and how every single game they're always saying like, oh, well, this team wins and this team wins and this team loses. This team's already out of their conference tournament, so they can't win their way in anymore. It's a little bit like that, right? There's going to be a cut line somewhere. And if there's a bid thief like Clemson, then the cut line moves up one. And a team that was right there on the bubble and in gets kicked out. So right now, if the committee keeps the same logic, the bubble bursts after Alabama. So really there's only, I hate to say this, but it feels like there's only one bid thief opportunity this week because I don't think, unfortunately, the committee is going to use their logic of keeping Boise State ahead of Alabama, even though they're ranking them ahead of Alabama right now. I don't think that the committee is going to be able to use that logic if UNLV wins. I do think UNLV is just going to steal Boise State's spot. And that's unfortunate, but I think that's how it would play out. The only bid thief opportunity really is Clemson coming in and forcing their way in by winning the ACC championship game, ultimately being probably the 12th seed. And then that's a bid that you can't give to an at-large team in Alabama unless you kick SMU out. So I really don't think that the committee's kind of tied themselves in knots here. So they're going to have to decide, do we punish a team for losing a game that other teams didn't have to play and put teams in that were idle this week? Or do we keep the same logic we have with the current rankings and maybe not get some of the big brands that we know that they want in
obviously
there?
Because I mean we don't like saying it, but we do because it's true. At the end of the day, this is still television. This is still ratings. It's still
a TV
who's
show.
bring in eyeballs. And if you kick Bama for SMU or if you kick Bama for UNLV, I mean, that's not going to bring in as many eyeballs. It's not going to bring in as big of a name. Trying to sell, UNLV, Penn State, that's not going to be as big. Or, Boise State, Notre Dame, that's not going to bring in as many eyeballs. Though if you watch football, maybe it should. And if either of those two teams win, that would be absolute madness. To watch Boise State, walk into South Bend and then, beat Notre Dame, that would be madness.
Which they absolutely could.
And
they
it could
absolutely
happen.
Could. If you're sitting here saying, well, on paper, it's a 20-point spread, Ohio State lost a game that they were 20-point favorites in just Saturday. So
also Notre Dame, the better case,
they
lost to NIU, who is a worse team than Boise State.
Yes.
They've lost to worse team, worse by a long shot too. So and by the way, the formula for them would be the same. NIU's formula was lean on the running back and hope you can play some good defense. That's the Boise State formula as well. So I don't know, man. It's a little bit crazy, and I'm going a little bit meta on this conversation. I'm upset that we're already kind of like getting ready to be mad at the committee because they've proven themselves to be terrible at their jobs and they've proven themselves to just get it wrong constantly. But that's what we're doing. I'm preparing to watch conference championship games all Saturday and be super excited about the way everything shakes out and love everything, and then go, okay, let's get up on Sunday morning and do the live show and let's see what happens. And then we're going to sit here on the live show and we're going to watch Bama get in over, Boise State or UNLV, or, it's like someone's going to get kicked for Bama and it's going to be madness. And I won't stand for it. I'm already ready to be upset about it. I know I shouldn't because they haven't done it yet, but I was upset for Florida State last year. I was upset, again, like you said, with TCU. There's several times the committee has gotten it, I think, blatantly wrong. And yeah, it's shocking that we still let a committee who probably barely watches football still make these decisions.
Look, I'll just say this. If you line up Boise State and Alabama to play on a neutral field, Alabama probably wins 8 or 9 out of 10 times. Like, objectively speaking,
sure,
Alabama is probably the better team and would probably win that game somewhere between 70 to 90% of the time.
Maybe.
Right. But on any given Saturday, I get that. And Boise State is going to be a tough out in this college football playoff because of the style of football that they play. But just follow that logic then. Like, if you're willing to kick Boise State out if they lose, and Alabama doesn't do anything to prove that they're better than Boise State this week, rank Alabama ahead of Boise State. Just like prepare everybody for that. It would look a lot better for you, and it would look like it just wouldn't look like this whole thing is just rigged to get the biggest brands in. I want to ask one more question about Alabama. Like we said earlier, guys, there's not a lot of controversy at the top. I don't think you can really debate. Georgia being all the way up at 5 might piss people off, but I mean,
it's kind of default at this point. I mean,
it's default, and if they beat Texas again, they'll have probably the 2 best wins in the entire country.
Yeah, they'll jump up to number 2.
Yeah, so it's really going to work itself out there.
Man. Ugh.
Yeah, it's going to work itself out there. I just want to talk about, if you were to, does any team other than Alabama have a case for that 11 spot? The last at large bid.
No, I think honestly, this is the point, right? So like looking after them, you have Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and then that's where Arizona State comes in, who obviously gets the Big 12 bid if they win. Those next couple teams don't have a case, and it's because they played themselves out. Right, you can complain all you want about good wins, or I know South Carolina's all up in arms because they're playing better at the end of the season. Congrats, you beat Clemson. Like, that's a good win. You didn't exactly stomp them, but you beat them. Congratulations. But you play yourself out of it, right? When you lose that many games, if you're Ole Miss and you lose to Florida and you lose to Kentucky, right, and you lose to Georgia, or no, they beat it. But if you lose to God, I'm forgetting LSU. That was their 3rd loss. I forget everyone. I mean, that's the point, right? As I'm forgetting losses because there's teams that have so many losses. Of course, across the course of a season, there's too many teams with too many losses. I'm not going to defend you, right? I can recall Notre Dame's singular loss, and I'm not going to punish them for it that much, right? Because the rest of the season, they played really good football.
There are people that would say that Notre Dame does not deserve to be in because they lost to Northern Illinois. I don't think those people are rational, but those people do exist.
I mean, yeah, sure. But again, like SMU, I can recall their singular loss to BYU. I can recall singular losses. When you're a team like, Ole Miss or South Carolina or Miami, and you've got some bad losses on your resume and you haven't been that team all year, I'm sorry, you don't get to complain. If you get to be like Alabama and accident your way in, congratulations. You won by default. You're the, not quite as stinky as the other losers, but like you still don't really deserve to be there. If you go on a run, congratulations. I mean, Bama could go on a run and win the whole thing, I guess, but that doesn't mean that they really like earned their spot in the playoff. They just got there, right? And that's what happens with a lot of these systems is you're going to have teams that don't necessarily earn it, but they're there because we decided that's the format and we're making sure we get all the teams that do earn it. So I have zero interest in listening to, Miami or Ole Miss or South Carolina whine about it tonight because you didn't earn it. You did not earn it. You can whine and complain but Bama lost to Oklahoma. I don't care. I don't care at all. If you're Ole Miss, you lost to Kentucky. Congrats. I have no interest in listening to any of that conversation right now.
It's just like the basketball tournament. Every March, I'll go back to that. There's teams that feel like they got screwed. There's teams that feel like they, didn't get in when they should have. But we're talking about in basketball, we're talking about teams 65 through 68 or whatever, right? In football, we're going to be talking about teams 12 through 16. Debo, I'd love to know. Love to know what team you're talking about there.
He's talking about Miami.
Okay, yeah.
Because Syracuse finished with 9-3. Congrats, you lost that one. And a team that almost beat Georgia. Yeah, cool. Okay, you could lose to Kentucky. Ole Miss has the same exact thing. Okay, Kentucky lost to Georgia by a similar margin. Look, Diva, I agree with you, man. I'll say I don't think Bama deserves it, but the point is neither does Miami and neither does South Carolina and neither does Ole Miss. So, like, who cares? Like, at the end of the day, who cares? None of these teams really deserve it. You could flip a coin, you could spin a spinner, you could play rock, paper, scissors for it. It doesn't mean you earned it on the football field. Like, it doesn't mean that you've done. If Miami went and beat Syracuse, they got nothing to complain about. They'd be up there at 6 or 7 or something like that, with a chance to jump and, be one of those top seeds. I mean, they've been one of those top seeds. They've been assumed to get the bye over SMU for that long. And now they don't get that benefit of the doubt because they didn't take care of their business. I mean, that's the sad reality, right? And so that's what it is, right? It's not that it's not that we're saying Miami's a terrible team, or it's not that we're saying that Bama's amazing. Like, I'm not going to make that case. But at the same time, it's like, if you don't want that, go win your games, right? And that's just kind of the sad reality about it. That's why the 12-team playoff makes so much sense, is because last year with the 4 seed, Florida State gets left out when you could make a real case they deserved it, right? And I'm sure, being a Miami fan, you probably don't love Florida State, and you're probably happy to watch them get left out. But at the same time, like, we didn't like that situation. It makes more sense to have them in at the 5 or have them in somewhere in there, like, 6 or 7 if you don't think they're that good, because that sets the precedent for other teams in the future that get in that situation. And so that's really what I'm saying, is just you can't make that case when you lose that many games, right? You lose that many games down the stretch, somebody's going to get in, somebody's going to be the one who kind of, ends up with the less stinky loser, right? They're not quite as bad as the other ones. I don't honestly care if you want to make the case that Miami's better than Bama, and I hate the Bama love anyway. I'm going to, pop this up just real quick because I actually like this. Should have took care of business for sure. Bama just gets benefit out every season. Totally agree with you, and they don't deserve that either. And what's funny is you'll watch Bama go up to South Bend and get their butts handed to them because Notre Dame's a better team than Bama, and they'll go get beat if they get in that situation. So it'll just be vindication for the rest of us that they probably didn't deserve to be there either. So, but look, I mean, at the end of the day, that's just kind of what the point of the 12 team is you're going to get teams that belong, and you're going to get probably every year you're going to get a couple teams that don't belong. There's going to be years where, I'm looking at Arizona State. They've played well down the stretch. In my opinion, yeah, not one of the top 12 teams, but because of the system, because of the way that it's set up, they're going to get the bid if they win the Big 12. And that's good because you should still be able to win your conference and get in. Again, it's just, finding a way to make sure you get all the teams that deserve it. And while this year there's probably less than 12 teams that deserve it, maybe next year there's even less than this year, you're at least going to get everybody who does deserve it. So that's kind of the point that I think is good about the 12-team playoff.
I'll just go back to basketball, man. Like, we every year you can point at a couple teams and say, oh, this team should have got over this bubble team. This team should have got in over this bubble team. But at the end of the tournament, we're usually not worried about that, right? We're usually not considering those teams. You're thinking, wow, that team would have made a run to the Final Four. These are all flawed teams. Every single season, we're going to be talking about teams 12 through 16. They're all going to be flawed in different ways, and it's just going to come down to what the committee values a little bit more. This year, it seems like they're going to value a quality win. Alabama has the best win of any of those teams in consideration. Yes, they have 3 losses. Yes, they have some terrible losses included in that. But getting spanked by Oklahoma is not a good look 2 weeks before Selection Sunday.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
But they also beat Georgia. And they also, hammered LSU in Baton Rouge.
Those were some of the things we were wondering about.
And they hammered Mizzou, who's still ranked by the College Football Playoff Committee.
For no reason at all. But yeah, like that was the point, was we were trying to figure out what the committee was looking for, if they were going to look for wins or losses as the main thing. I think what this is showing us is they're going to value wins more than they're going to value losses. Notre Dame's another example of that. Notre Dame, obviously, with the embarrassing loss to NIU, but they have big wins on the schedule. That's why they are where they are, right? Georgia, with not the best, resume, but they've got good wins, right? They beat, Tennessee. They have good wins on the schedule. Obviously, again, Trey, we talked about this off the top, but Ohio State as well. Like, they're not getting punished for their loss against Michigan as much as we think they probably deserve to, because they're being valued for beating Indiana and beating Penn State and beating all these other teams that are in the field as well.
Let's get out of here on that. Garrett, thanks for joining me tonight on the playoff live stream. We've got our championship week preview show coming out. We're recording it tomorrow. It'll be out Thursday morning in your podcast feed of choice right here on the YouTube channel as well. Make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, following along at 3TechPod on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribed on your favorite podcast app of choice to make sure that you don't miss any of the content we're churning out for championship week, for the college football playoff, and for bowl season. Don't forget about bowl season, guys. There's a lot of fun football still on random Tuesday nights in December this year too. That's not related to the college football playoff. For Garrett Turney, I'm Trey Reeves. We'll talk to you guys really soon.
Gracious him. Howard.